Hi, I'm Mark Reed. Follow me as I attempt to put my new book, Impact Culture, into practice and discuss it with others taking a similar journey. You'll get tips that will help you achieve more impact from your research and stay healthy, no matter how busy you are. Rediscover your purpose. Lead from behind to empower those around you. Transform your work culture. Welcome to Season 4 of the Fast Track Impact Podcast. Welcome back, and welcome to the third in this new series on monitoring, evaluating and evidencing impact. And this week I want to dive deeper into evaluation and give you a few examples of what evaluation might actually look like in practice. So far, I guess what we've done is quite abstract. I've tried to kind of thread through examples as I've gone. But I think that if I can give you a few examples of mixed methods designs, give you some of the methods I use day in, day out, hopefully this is all going to become a bit more concrete for you. Yeah, that's what it looks like. That's what I need to do. Hey, that's a cool method. Hey, maybe I could try that. And as a result of making this more concrete, hopefully this is going to be more achievable for you. And hopefully I inspire you to try some of these ideas out right now in your research. I'm going to stick with the kind of the quickest, easiest methods where possible, but I'm not going to shy away from the difficult to evaluate impacts, in particular impacts arising from policy engagement and impacts arising from public engagement. I'll think in some detail about testimonial interviews, because that's a place where things can go wrong, and it can be one of the most important forms of evidence if done well. So first of all, I want to think about some of the methods you might use for evaluating economic impact. So some of you might be in the kind of technology space. We've got this new thing we've patented, so we've commercialized it. How do I prove that I've got an impact in that kind of space? And I wanted to foreground this one because it's one of the trickiest ones, because the data you're trying to collect is often commercially sensitive, and therefore nobody's going to give it to you. So right at the very kind of early stages of this, I do know some people who are quite happy to evaluate the economic impacts of a startup based on the investment that it manages to get. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about this, if I'm honest, but it's there. So in that case, you can, of course, look at the amount of investment that a company gets. Yeah, we haven't built this yet. We haven't rolled it out. It's not in people's hands yet. We're not making any profits yet. But right at that early stage, and of course this is a stage that the researcher often has visibility to, especially if it's their spin-out company, you could potentially already be getting a sense of at least the market interest in your innovation through the level of investment that you can get. Now, the reason I feel uncomfortable about this is because, is this real money? Actually, this is effectively debt. Your investors are expecting to get that back with a return. And for all you know, your technology maybe doesn't quite work as you expected, and your company flops, and you just lose people a whole load of money. So are there any real benefits? Yeah. And so instantly I would start already to look for other indicators. Well, this is how many people we've employed. And this is the quality of those jobs. And so, yeah, even if we end up going bust, we gave a bunch of people some really high quality jobs for a number of years. I'm hoping I'm going to have more to show for it than that, but great. And what we're doing now is we're kind of moving into the realm of economic indicators. I'm not really sure what the actual economic value of this is, but here are a couple of indicators that might give you a sense of what's going on. Let's move now into the realm of, okay, we worked with a company and we gave them a bunch of ideas. They turned that into a product. They enhanced their existing product or service, for example. And we're pretty sure that they've made a whole load of money out of that, and we would like to know. Now, the problem you've got, as I said, is commercial sensitivity that might or might not be available. But first thing I do is I'm going to have a look and see, is this company listed on the stock market? What do they have to publish? And depending on the type of company you're looking at and the rules of the game in the country that you're working in, it may in fact be already published. And that's gold dust because you've got that independent corroborating evidence with that documentation. So job done. I need look no further. Of course, I might be interested to go beyond those figures and delve into that, and I might still want to interview some people. But great. So let's assume worst case scenario that is not is a privately owned company. They don't have to publish any of that stuff. They don't want to publish any of that stuff, and they don't want anyone to know. But you want to know. So the first thing, and this is a tip I'll come back to with testimonial interviews, is that I don't ask for the information via email. Instead, I try and secure a meeting with someone that I think credibly might have that information and ideally might have the authority to share that information with me. So I research the company, I work out who the right person is. As a researcher, very often I know who that person is, I've been working with them, but if not, I research that. And now I'm saying I want to understand what's been going on with our relationship, how we've helped you, how we might be able to build on that and help you more. Could you spare some time to discuss this with me? I'm not saying exactly what I'm looking for yet, so that in interview mode, one-to-one now, I can start with a hierarchy. And at the top of that hierarchy, I want to know how much profit is being made from this. Nope, not willing to give you that information. And on an email, if you go straight in for that, the answer will come back, no, that's commercially sensitive, we're not able to give that to you. And depending on how high up that person is in the hierarchy, you may not be able to recover from a no. Okay, what about this? That's it. They've stopped answering your emails. This is it's cheeky. Maybe they're even a bit offended that you thought that you had the right to that information. Who knows? So interview mode. Okay, that's fine. I thought you probably wouldn't want to share that with me. Would you be comfortable sharing your turnover figures? Maybe that's less sensitive. Maybe you get that information. Not willing to share that. Would you be willing to share, to give us your market share? Great. No, not willing to give us the market share. And if I know what the size of that market is, I might then, from the market share, be able to get a sense of how much money they might be making. Would you be willing to tell me if you are the market leader now in this particular market? Well, yes, we trumpet that from the rooftops. That's part of our marketing. Great. It's maybe not what I wanted, but I can now do a bit of analysis. This is the size of this particular market. This is the market leader. Here are some comparator companies that are behind them, where we do have some data. I've instantly now managed to benchmark the amount of money they're making out of this to the nearest 10 million, perhaps. But it's clear this is big, and that's the kind of evidence that I get from that. And then I can go for the other things, in terms of jobs and other stuff as well. So come in with a hierarchy of lists with the stuff that you most want at the top down to the stuff at the bottom and see how far you get. But one final thing is to say that it's always worth asking whether the person giving you that data might be willing to give it if you can assure confidentiality. And it's then just whether or not they trust and believe you enough that you will give them that confidentiality. So the ref in the UK, for example, allows you to redact information from an impact case study. And that may be sufficient. In my experience, the bigger the company, the less likely they are to accept that as a compromise. One other way around this, though, actually, is that you might pull a deal. This is the business world, after all, so let's make an exchange here. If you give me access to some of your data, we will turn this into an impact case study, which you can publish. It will be published on a database. In the meantime, on our university website. And this is now independent university research that proves what you're doing is doing good in the world. And that, for many companies, has marketing value. So if I now go to their head of marketing and I say, I'm willing to, for free, do a whole load of research to prove how your product or service works and all of the many benefits it derives for people. I'm going to interview your customers, for example, all of this stuff. Then that may have enough value that the head of marketing is now speaking to the other people and saying, you know what, we should really work with these guys. I think actually it's worth taking the risk of giving them some of this data. Okay, so that is the first, I guess, mixed methods design around, it's not really a research design, is it? But first approach to collecting impact data in a fairly challenging scenario. The second, and I think I'm going to give you 4 of these, but second of these is going to be something you can use for a whole load of different contexts, actually. So you could use it in public engagement, in policy engagement. I've done some training, whatever it might be. There are 3 elements to this, and it starts with something called a postcard to your future self. So people come into my public lecture, they come into my policy seminar, and there is a postcard on their seat. They come to my exhibition, there's a stall at the back, and there are postcards being given out. Postcard's got an image linked to the research, the lecture, the exhibition, whatever it might be. And on the back, there's a question. In a public engagement setting, I would ask something along the lines of, what do you want to remember from today? Or what do you want to do differently based on what you learned today? And in a policy setting, I might ask people, how might you apply what you learned today in policy or practice? Or what might be the barriers that would prevent you from applying what you learned today in your work? And they write their postcard, and they then choose whether or not they want to provide their address, tick a box, so this is GDPR compliant. And now, a month later, I post this back to them. And something magical happens at this point, because this is not just an evaluation tool. This now reminds people, oh, I wanted to remember that thing. I've increased the likelihood that I can come back and detect a change in understanding and awareness. I wanted to do that thing. Did I do it? No. I'm now getting a reminder from myself to do that thing, and I hopefully now go and do that thing. And I now, when I come back later, have evidence for impact. Now, of course, depending on how you've written your GDPR statement and your research ethics, you may, in fact, be able to use some of the stuff people have written, but usually it's not that useful. So ultimately, this is giving you access to who turned up. I know who these people are, and GDPR compliant, I now have a way back to ask them questions later. So that's the key value of this entry point to this set of methods. Now, remember that impacts evolve, they mature over time. I want to give this a bit of time, so some breathing space. Maybe 3 months later, I'm contacting them with my evaluation survey. So, did it work? If not, I'm giving you another reminder, and maybe I can come back in a year's time. If not, maybe that's because actually it didn't work. There was some problem. Let's learn about that. And if so, that's what's happened. That's the benefit. Now I've got something much more sophisticated in terms of evidence of impact. And the third and final step is that I'm now going to dig into that with a subsample of people that I'm going to go and talk to. So, for example, it turns out that one particular organization sent a whole load of responses to the survey, and there's something really interesting going on there. Here's someone who's using this in a completely unexpected way. Let's go and find out about that. So in In social science terms, I would call this a purposive sample. So there's a clear purpose. I want to understand my impact and collect evidence of this. It's not a random sample or anything like that. But where there's something interesting, I follow it up and I interview those people. And I'll come on to that interview process later. And the message here is you do not have to be a social scientist or have any experience of this to do an interview. Yes, it helps if you've got that experience, clearly. But this is something that we can all do. And now I've got a really in-depth understanding of actually what's happening. It's also just worth bearing in mind before I move to the next method that there, as you've seen, is kind of a nesting. So this number of people came to my thing. Of them, a proportion filled in the postcard, and I was able to find out who they were. Of them, a proportion of them now filled in my survey, and a proportion of them now were interviewed by me. And I'm hoping that enough people answer that survey that I can make a claim. I'm not going to make any kind of statistically rigorous claim to representation, but I'm going to make a claim that, yeah, this many thousands of people perhaps have been exposed to these events. And now here is some kind of headline figures from our survey that say the vast majority of them benefit in these ways. And now let's put some colour and some shape and some nuance to this with some quotes from a few of these testimonials. The assumption being, although I only spoke to 3 people, that ultimately when I put that nested set of data together into a narrative, I assume that the majority of people who were exposed to that intervention had similar benefits. And of course, it may or may not be the case, but that's how sampling works effectively, isn't it? I mean, we're researchers after all, and this is a kind of a good enough approach to sampling for impact. Now, let's move to my third of 4 example methods. And this is something that I'm going to use now for evaluating public engagement, which is notoriously difficult to evaluate. So let's go for something nice and tricky. So I got invited to talk on the news, or someone made a documentary about my research. How on earth do I know who watched that? I mean, or what the benefit of that was to them. And the key thing here is that you need to make sure that you're not just evidencing reach, because as I said in a previous episode, reach without significance is meaningless in impact terms. I need to know that at least a proportion of those people I reached benefited in some way. And you might be able to get viewer figures from the various networks. You might be able to get views if it was online. If you did this through other kind of forms of social media, you get various other metrics baked into the platforms, but they have one thing in common. They tell you about reach and not significance. And so without that significance data, this is meaningless. So great, collect that reach data. But where your effort needs to lie is in demonstrating significance. And so the first place that I might go might be a social media analysis. And so I'm going to go beyond kind of an automated sentiment analysis. I'm going to go beyond word clouds and the like, although some kind of content analysis might begin to give me some clues as to what's going on. I'm probably going to want to do a qualitative analysis of what people were saying. And now I've got a sense of, that's the kind of benefit. Those are the kind of things people are doing as a result of this. And I've got some nice quotes to illustrate. And that combined with those reach statistics might then give me some kind of meaningful sense of what actually happened. I might then go and where people are identifiable on social media, I might then message them on that platform and ask if I could do an interview with them, invite them to a focus group, ask them to fill in a survey, for example. I would caution, however, that the research ethics of analysing social media data are fraught. So I'm going to suggest with all of these evaluation designs, probably wise to put it through your ethics committee, get some advice from them. And the issue with social media is whether or not this is informed consent. So be careful on that one. But that would be my first port of call. Actually doing a deep dive into what might be available on social media. The next approach, though, with this is that I might do some before-after polling. So I was on the news. Someone made a documentary that aired. There was some kind of intervention it was a festival, for example, and we did a bunch of events. Can we get a before-after poll? So this is about reaching that audience of people who came along and finding out what they thought coming into your public engagement and then what they thought coming out of your public engagement. And of course, you can do that with a very simple survey. It could be quantitative, could be qualitative. Tell me your understanding of X. Now tell me what you understand about this same thing, for example. But for something like a TV documentary, that's a little bit more difficult because who on earth are these people? I can't give them a survey. And even if I did, a TV viewer isn't going to do that before they watch a TV program. But it turns out that there is a solution to this. And in fact, on this podcast, I think it was season 2, I interviewed someone from Swansea University who did exactly this. She got her research integrated into 3 or 4 episodes of the TV soap Casualty, a hospital TV soap. And her research was on maggot therapy, which is important given antimicrobial resistance. If antibiotics don't work, you might need maggot therapy. But there's a problem. People don't like the treatment and they refuse it. And as a result, people could die. So that was her goal. So she integrated this idea around maggot therapy into these episodes of the soap. And designed this with the script writers to try and encourage people to realise, you know what, this isn't actually as disgusting as I thought. And so she then employed a polling company, and it's not that cheap. I've looked at polling companies for various things, and you're usually looking at high singles or kind of 10 to 20 grand for a representative sample of the country kind of thing. But you can do that. And you can find a polling company that specialises in TV polling. They exist, and they will then tell you, give you a representative sample, in this case, of casualty viewers. And she wanted to find out 2 things. One was their yuck factor. How disgusting do you think maggot therapy is before and after? And how likely would you be to say yes to maggot therapy were it offered to you on the NHS before and after? And she detected a reduction in the yuck factor, an increase in the likelihood people would say yes. And the final part of the jigsaw was that, I don't know what happened here, was to look at the main supplier of maggots to the NHS and see, do you get an uptick in the number of maggots that are being used as a result of this? So quite an elegant example, and do go back and find the episode if you're interested in this in more depth. But finally, though, if you don't have the resource to do that, you can do a bit of a homemade version of this using social media. So I don't know who's watching this this thing on TV, but these people are self-identifying on social media. Can I now work with the TV company, the TV production company, for example, best case scenario, or just with some influencers in this space? To try and capture a proportion of those viewers who have self-identified on social media, they're watching it, and now I'm incentivizing them to come and look at all these additional resources on my website. Here's an interesting fun poll, maybe built into the social media platform or on my website. Once I've got them there, I'm trying to add value to them, such that they're willing now to take a next step, join my mailing list. Come to a workshop to learn more, or fill in a survey or something like that. And it's only going to be a small proportion of those viewers. It's not going to be representative as a sample, but you know what? It may well be good enough. And if you want more on this, just Google my Media Impact Guide and Toolkit, which I created with The Conversation. And in fact, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So my third and final example is something that I would use for evaluating policy impact. And policy impacts are notoriously difficult to evaluate. You've got ideological challenges that mean that no matter how much the evidence might suggest this is a good idea, nothing happens. You get changes in government, which switch ideology. You've got time lags. You've got a whole load of messy complexity in terms of, actually, to what extent did my research make a difference? And so, for me, there are three things you need to do to evaluate a policy impact. And the first of those is to find that smoking gun. So what is it that you think in the policy domain might be linked to your research? Okay, it's a set of guidelines, and here's a new guideline that seems to be based on my recommendations. Here's a number that's being proposed in a policy context. And that number happens to be the same number I published and then recommended they should use to set this funding threshold or whatever it might be. So in an ideal world, you have a policy citation. So someone has actually, in that policy document, cited your research. And if you want to find out, in fact, as a quick aside here, if your research has been cited in policy documents, then go to altmetric.com for a free version of this. There's a paid version of this and some other paid software that can do this very well. But altmetric.com is good enough. And you can do it for free. Go to the website, it'll explain how to do this, and now you can see if any of your papers have been cited in policy documents. Great. Happy days. Sadly, however, the scenario I'm going to put you into, which is sadly the most common scenario, is that I think this might be me, but there are no citations to any research in this document. So where are we going to go next? So based on what I found, I'm now looking to my pathway. Now, remember, the pathway is not your impact, and the evidence you're going to get in this is probably going to be a bit circumstantial. But I look there to see, did we put that number in? Did we make that recommendation? Yes, here's the research, and here's what we then did with that research. We turned that into a policy brief. We took that policy brief to a seminar. We did a series of webinars then with each of the devolved administrations across the UK. That then led to us getting invited to give evidence to an inquiry in Parliament. That then actually got cited in the inquiry report. That's not policy, doesn't count as impact, but what are the chances that we made that recommendation? We were all over that pathway, talking to all of these people, making that recommendation, and then out pops at the other end our recommendation. That surely was us. Well, it is circumstantial, but it's persuasive enough that I'm building my narrative. Now I need to make that final link, and I will typically do that through a testimonial interview. And the example that I use from my own research to illustrate this, and I've got quite a few, and have a look at my impact case study from REF 2021 for a number more examples, and this particular example in more depth. But there was a budget announcement for it was £640 million that will do a bunch of tree planting and restore 35,000 hectares of peatland. I recognised that number, and I was like, I know where that number comes from. It's from this report. Now, the report was by an organisation called the Committee on Climate Change. I had advised the committee, but I hadn't written the report, and the report also didn't cite our research that I'd used to advise the committee. All I've got is an acknowledgement in the front cover that says I advised the committee. So I dig a bit deeper, and I remember that I advised some consultants that they'd employed to help write the report. And the consultants were building a model And I helped them build this model. And so I emailed the consultants and I said, can you send me the final version of this model? And it's a spreadsheet model. And that's when I hit gold, because there in the spreadsheet model are a bunch of papers that explain exactly where they get all the figures from. And the figure that pops out at the end of that model is 35,000. And so great. So now... that's good enough in terms of that causal link from our research to the Committee on Climate Change report. But the budget announcement doesn't mention the Committee on Climate Change report. Clearly, that's more than a coincidence. So let's make sure that we tie that up in concrete terms. And it's a testimonial interview now with someone in DEFRA who, when I asked them, says, that we used the Committee on Climate Change recommendations and we put that recommendation to Treasury, which ultimately then made it into the budget. And so now I can put those different bits of evidence together into my causal chain. In my case, I actually said to this person, so were you aware that I advised the committee based on our research, and this is where it comes from. And I kind of showed her the research and the paper trail that I developed. And she was like, oh, no, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Interesting. So would you be willing to actually give me a quote that explains how you... based this recommendation on the Committee on Climate Change's report, which in turn was based on our research? Well, yeah, that's what happened, wasn't it? I can see the evidence here in front of me. Yes, of course. And for me now, that gives me some really nice narrative power. Someone really senior who is making the decisions, who actually now, in their words, is saying this wouldn't have been possible without our research. Great. On testimonials, I want to, maybe finish with this. Will I finish on this? Will I do something more? Let's finish with this. So, I've already alluded to this. The biggest mistake I see when it comes to testimonials is people who request testimonials via email. And there are two things that go wrong here. The first, as I've mentioned, is that you get a no. And in this case, had I asked that senior civil servant, do you know if the budget the budget line was based on our research, she would have said no, it wasn't. It was based on a Committee on Climate Change report instead. Go away. There it might have ended. And coming back from that could have been difficult. Try not to get a no. Try instead to get an appointment, because in meeting mode, I might get somewhere. My most extreme example of this, in fact, was someone else in DEFRA. In fact, they'd moved on. And there was one bit of evidence that I knew she was the only person who knew how that decision had been made and whether or not it was in fact based on our research. And so luckily I remembered who she was. I'd kind of kept track of her and I was trying to meet up with her, but she was incredibly difficult to find and to pin down and to talk to. And eventually, 2 years later, after trying to try and meet her, I realised she was going to the climate conference, the UN climate conference. She was now a negotiator. And I was going as well. So I was like, yes, this is my chance. I managed to find her and contact her. And I said, can I meet you? And she was like, yeah, I'll give you breakfast slot before I meet the negotiation team. And that breakfast slot ended up being 10 minutes that I actually got to talk to her after we'd queued up and all the rest of it and done the pleasantries. And when I got to the question, she was like, no, we didn't use your research, Mark. We based this recommendation on evidence we'd got from another policy mechanism called the Peatland Code. And so had I emailed her and asked the question direct, again, I'd have gotten a no. But I'd kind of come prepared because I'd kind of researched the pathway and I could see that that was quite a possible thing that was going on. And I was like, okay, so are you aware that I was the original architect of the Peatland Code and it's based on my research? I can send you the papers and all the evidence for this later on. And she was like, no, tell me more. And I explained briefly, cool, I didn't realise. So on that basis, would you be willing to say something along the lines of the fact that you based this policy decision on on information that came from the Peatland Code, which in turn was based on the research that I'd done to help you get that answer, but via the Peatland Code. And she was like, well, yes, of course. Send me the stuff and I'll check it out. And great, we got that quote. So make sure that you don't lose your opportunity just because you went the wrong mode. But the second reason this is problematic is that what I've seen across the sector, which I think is really not great practice, is people will email people. So researchers or professional services staff will email people with draft testimonials to say, we would like you to say something along these lines, and we're pretty sure that this is how you've benefited, add some detail, etc. And if you got it right, then yeah, great, I'll sign the letter, I'll make a few tweaks. If you got it wrong, it's even more embarrassing. But crucially, it may be that there are even bigger, more impressive impacts. There are nuances. There is stuff that you are never going to know because you didn't have the conversation. And well, if this is clearly all you want to know, then yes, I can tell you that happened. A lot of other stuff happened as well, but clearly you're not interested in that. So yeah, I won't bother mentioning that. And you potentially miss out on really big things. So have a conversation, and it is a conversation, nothing more scary than that. With this method of collecting testimonials, we are going to record and transcribe what they've said. So you need to put this through ethics approval. I don't think that is normally done, but I'm going to suggest that's what you do need to do. So through ethics, and I'm emailing this person, can we meet up? Again, there's often a problem, which is that I feel a bit awkward about this. I haven't seen you for years, and here I am now asking for like a character reference for me to say how great I was. And so for me, I want to meet you to find out how things have gone and how I can help you more. So I'm giving back in this as well. And in that evaluation part, it's the 3 criteria for any impact evaluation, which is significance, reach, and attribution. This has kind of been a bit implicit in what I've said previously, so let's make that explicit. Was there anything significant? If so, how far-reaching was it? And let's just check this was, at least in some way, attributable back to our research. And then a final question around the ethics of this, which was, did anything go wrong? Which is when you often then get the negatives. So remember, as I said a couple of episodes ago, I think, this is about evaluating the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. So now I transcribe my interview. I highlight the bits that I'm going to use. I now put them into nice English because people don't speak incorrect grammar. Any other things that I need in terms of dates to make sure it's in the right ref cycle, for example, I stitch it all together in a way that is going to work. And now I'm sending them their draft testimonial alongside the color-coded transcript so they can see exactly how this was based, as far as possible in their own words, on what they told me. Are you willing to sign this? Do you want to make any tweaks? And great, and I'll get this on letter-headed paper. If for some reason that person never answers another email, they disappear off the face of the planet, I can never get back to them, I still have a consent form signed by them saying that I can at least verbatim quote them from that recording. So I've got a bit of a fail-safe built in here as well. And that is how you get really powerful evidence-based testimonials, and how you might then plug them into a mixed methods policy evaluation that's got the policy document there cited. It's got some of the stuff from the pathway. It's got the testimonial. It's all stitched together into a credible narrative that is going to give you the evidence you need to convince whatever audience it is that, yes, indeed, we did, at least to some extent, have impact. Now, I'm going to come back for a future episode, not quite sure when, a few episodes hence. I want to do a few other things in the intervening time, and we're going to think about evidence, and we're going to think much more in terms of ref as well as part of that whole process. And I'll maybe give you some more kind of worked examples of how you now take that monitoring and evaluation data and turn that into compelling evidence. But before we get to that, I want to dive a bit more into monitoring and evaluation. And I've alluded already to a few of the things that are coming, but I'm especially excited about next week. I am looking forward to talking to Rachel Blanche. I loved writing the paper with her in Research Policy, which I'll link in the show notes. It's where the key source for all the stuff I'm doing in the podcast around evaluation. So one of the co-authors, but she works in the arts. And has just got this wealth of knowledge and creative approaches, and yeah, I can't wait to re-engage with Rachel, and yeah, hopefully you're looking forward to it as well, and we'll take it from there. So thank you. Hopefully you've got a clearer sense of what you're doing in terms of monitoring and evaluation. You have a sense of where this might be going in terms of evidencing, and hopefully you are feeling equipped but also inspired to go and monitor and evaluate your impact.